My name is Icarus Van Calder, and the only reason I am still alive to tell this is that I was too tired, on the worst night of my life, to die on the schedule a thing without lungs had set for me. I was 41 years old when the Fifth War ended. I had been a runner for the Tanaka family before the war, a soldier during it, and after the armistice I came home to low tier and found that home was no longer the word for the place. Low tier is an orbital habitat, a kilometer of pressure glass over our heads, the stars beyond it, and below the glass, the gutter streets where men like me used to make a living. The council that took the surface from us after the war did not want our habitat. They wanted our quiet, so they gave us the Xenobites and they called it law. I should describe them because if you have not seen one up close, the word demon will not carry the weight. A Xenobite stands a head taller than a tall man. It is pale, the pale of something that has never seen weather, and jointed in places a man is not jointed. The face is stitched shut. I mean that literally. They have no mouth, no nostrils, no breath. There is a slit where the eyes ought to be, and behind the slit there is something that watches. They are grown in vats by the council, fed on a slurry the smell of which I will carry to my grave, and they are not given pain. That is not a metaphor. The nerve that carries the message of hurt to a body is, in them, simply not connected. You can break a Xenobite's arm and it will keep coming. You can put a round through its chest and it will keep coming. The only reliable way to stop one, I learned, was to take its head off at the neck, and even that was not always enough on the first try. They walked the gutter streets in pairs. They did not speak. They carried long blades and short pistols, and they did not appear to need either. When a man was sentenced, by whatever logic the council used to sentence a man, the Xenobites came for him. They did not knock. They walked through the door as if the door were not there, which is to say they kicked it down without slowing, and they took him, and what was left of him was returned to the street the next morning, very carefully arranged. That was low tier when I came home. That was the city I tried to make a living in. I worked as a private investigator after the war. I will not pretend it was honest work. A man with my record does not get clean jobs. I found people who did not want to be found, and I retrieved things people did not want returned, and I did it for whoever paid, and I told myself that the work was the work. I had a one-room office above a noodle bar on the 8th deck, a cot in the back, a bottle in the desk, and a pistol I had carried since the war that I cleaned every Sunday whether it had been fired or not. I was, by the standards of the gutter, doing well. A woman came to see me on a Wednesday. I remember the day because it was the day the recyclers were down on the 8th deck and the whole hall smelled of fish. She was thin, and she wore the kind of coat people wear when they want to look like they have less money than they do, and she said her name was Jana and she had a job for me. There was a tape. The Tanaka family had it. She wanted it. She had the money to want it. Would I be willing? I should have said no. I had a rule after the war that I did not take work that put me back in front of the Tanaka family. Boss Tanaka had not forgiven me for the way I left, and the way I left had involved a stairwell and 3 of his cousins, and a fire I did not set on purpose. I had a rule, and the rule was good, and I broke it for the money, because the recyclers were down, and the rent was up, and the bottle in the desk was nearly empty. The tape was a data spool, a physical one, the kind we used in the war because the council could intercept anything in the air. What was on it she would not say. Where it was she could tell me. A locker in the back room of a Tanaka safe house on the 12th deck. A code. A window. 3 minutes, she said, and the spool was mine and the money was hers and we would never see each other again. I took the job. I took the money. I went up to the 12th deck on a Friday night when the streets were full, because a crowded street is a kind of armor, and I let myself into the back of the safe house through a service shaft I had used twice in the old days, and I found the locker, and I opened it with the code, and the spool was there, and I put it in my coat, and I turned around to leave, and there were 3 of Tanaka's men standing in the doorway with the door behind them already closed. What followed is the part I do not enjoy remembering. I will say that the room was small and the lights were bad, and one of the three was a cousin of the man whose face I had put through a stairwell railing in the bad old days, and that cousin recognized me. I will say that I had been a soldier, and the war had taught me certain things about small rooms, and that I used them. I will say that two of the three did not walk out, and the third was in no condition to follow me, and that when I came out of the safe house into the street, the spool was still in my coat, and there was blood on my sleeve that was not mine and blood on my hand that was. I went aground. I had a place on the second deck, the bottom deck, where the air is thick and the lights are bad and the council does not look very hard. I bolted the door. I sat with the spool in my hands and looked at it for a long time. And then, because I have always been a curious man and curiosity has always been the worst of my habits, I found a reader, and I played the spool, and I watched what was on it. It was a council meeting, not the public kind, the private kind, 3 of them in a room on the surface with the masks off. I had never seen a council member with the mask off. They are not what we have been told they are. They are very old and very small, and the skin of them is the color of a bruise that will not heal. They sat at a table and they spoke a language I did not understand, but the spool had a transcript layered into it, and the transcript was in trade tongue, and I read the transcript, and I read it again, and I sat in my chair and I did not move for a long time. They were going to vent us, the whole habitat, low tier and everyone in it, 300,000 souls under the pressure glass, and they were going to vent the air into the dark, and they were going to do it within the season, and the Xenobites were already being grown in numbers for the cleanup. The transcript said cleanup. They said it the way a man says the word laundry. I sat with that for a while. Then I put the spool back in my coat, and I cleaned my pistol, and I went out. I had been a private investigator for 6 years. Before that, I had been a soldier for 4. Before that, I had been a runner for the Tanaka family for 9. I knew, by then, that the woman called Jana had not told me the truth about the tape, because the truth about the tape was not the kind of truth a woman walks into an 8th deck office and offers to a man for money. I knew that someone had used me to move the tape out of a place it was buried, and I knew that the someone was not Jana, and I knew that the moment I delivered the tape I would be the 3rd body in the alley behind the noodle bar. I knew all of this very clearly, and I was, you understand, very tired, and a tired man makes decisions, a rested man does not. I decided I was going to keep the tape. I decided I was going to make it useful. I decided also that I was going to live, which was the most unreasonable of the 3 decisions, and the one I committed to hardest. The Xenobites came for me on the 3rd night. I do not know who told them. It might have been Jana when I did not arrive at the meet. It might have been the Tanaka family who would have wanted me dead twice over by then, once for the old business and once for the new. It might have been the council itself, having noticed that a spool was missing from a room it should not have been missing from. I never found out, and I have stopped caring. What matters is that they came, and they came in numbers I had not seen before. 3 of them. 3 Xenobites for 1 man on the 2nd deck. The council was paying attention. I was in a stairwell when I heard the first door go. The sound a Xenobite makes when it walks through a door is not the sound of a door breaking. It is a softer sound. The frame gives. The hinges give. The door goes inward as if a great quiet hand has pressed it. There is no shout, no announcement. There is only the sound of the frame, and then the sound of footsteps that are not in any hurry. I went up. Up is wrong in a habitat. Up means thinner air, brighter lights, more cameras, more council. But down was where they had come from, and so up was the only direction left. I went up the stairwell 2 flights at a time, and I heard them behind me, and they were not running. They did not need to run. They knew where I was going because there was only one direction I could go. I came out on the 4th deck into a market that was closing down for the night. The stalls were being shuttered, the lights coming down, the smell of cooking oil and old fish, and the particular tang of habitat air at the end of a long day. I went through the market at a walk, not a run, because a running man is a marked man, and I bought a paper bag from a vendor who was packing up, and I put my hands in my pockets, and I kept moving. Behind me somewhere, 3 Xenobites were coming up the stairwell at a walk that ate more ground than a run would have. I could not hear them yet. I knew they were there. I lost the first one in a press of people on the 5th deck, not lost as in escaped, lost as in separated. The market crowd was thick at the transit junction, and a Xenobite does not push through a crowd because a crowd does not register to a Xenobite as something to be pushed through. The crowd parts. Of course it parts. People know what a Xenobite is. The crowd parts, but the parting is slow, and slow is what I needed. I went through the junction the other way and into a service corridor I had used once in the old days, and I closed the hatch behind me, and I heard the hatch handle turn after I had cleared 3 turns of the corridor, and I kept going. I lost the second one in the elevator. The elevator was the part I dreamed about later. I have dreamed about it for years now, and the dream is always the same. I am in the elevator on the 6th deck going up, and the doors open on the 7th, and one of them is standing there. Just standing. The slit where its eyes ought to be is fixed on me, and the stitched face does not move, and behind it the corridor is empty, and I understand that it has been waiting on this floor, on this elevator, because it knew I would come. They are not clever, the Xenobites, but they are patient in a way that only a thing that does not breathe can be patient. It had stood on the 7th deck and waited for the elevator without growing bored, without growing tired, without needing water or food or sleep, and now the doors were open and there it was. I had my pistol in my hand before the doors finished opening. I put 3 rounds into its chest at a range of less than 2 meters. It took 1 step into the elevator. I put 2 rounds into its throat. It took another step. I went under its arm as it reached for me, and I came out of the elevator into the 7th deck corridor, and I hit the emergency lock on the elevator from the corridor panel, and the doors closed with it inside, and I heard, very clearly, the sound of a blade going through the inner door, and I ran. I had wasted 5 rounds on a thing that did not stop, and the corridor was long, and somewhere below me there were 2 more of them coming up, and I had a paper bag in one hand and a pistol in the other, and a data spool in my coat that the most powerful authority in the inhabited dark wanted very badly to have back. I ran. I am not proud of the running. A man should walk through his own city. But I ran, and I ran well, because the war had taught me to run, and I went up the maintenance ladder at the end of the corridor and onto the catwalks above the 7th deck where the air gets thin and the lights are red, and I lay flat on the grating, and I listened. I heard the elevator open below. I heard, faintly, the sound of a blade being drawn back through metal. I heard footsteps unhurried in the corridor. I heard them stop. I heard them start again in a different direction and recede. I lay on the grating for a long time. I do not know how long. I lay there until the sweat on my back went cold and the paper bag in my hand went soft. And while I lay there, I did the thing I should have done in my office on the Wednesday the woman came to see me. I thought. I thought about the Xenobites and what I knew about them and what I had just learned about them in the last hour. I thought about the way the one at the elevator had stood and waited. I thought about the way they did not run. I thought about the stitched faces, the absence of pain, the patience. I thought about the way the crowd had parted. I thought about the spool in my coat and the bruise-colored faces of the things on it and the word cleanup. And I thought about myself, about what I was, about what I had been, about a man who had been a runner and a soldier and an investigator and who was now on a catwalk on the 7th deck of a habitat the council had decided to vent, the only person in 300,000 who knew it was going to happen. I came down off the catwalk an hour later, and I went to find Boss Tanaka. I want you to understand what that meant. Boss Tanaka had wanted me dead for 15 years. The last time I had been in a room with him was the night of the stairwell and the cousin and the fire. I had been a young man then. I was not a young man anymore. Walking into a Tanaka safe house on my own feet at night with a spool in my coat that his people had been guarding when I took it was a thing only a man with nothing left to lose would do. I had something left to lose. I had a habitat. I went anyway. The Tanaka safe house on the 12th deck was not the one I had broken into. They had moved after the break-in the way smart families move. The new one was on the 14th in a converted warehouse the family had owned since before the war. I walked up to the front door. I put my pistol on the ground in front of the door. I knocked. I stood with my hands open at my sides. I waited. The door opened. Two men I did not recognize stood on the other side of it. They looked at me. They looked at the pistol on the ground. They looked at me again. One of them said, "You are a dead man." I said, "I know. I need to see the boss. Tell him I have the spool. Tell him I have read it. Tell him he is going to want to read it too." They took me inside. They took the spool. They took my coat. They sat me in a chair in a back room with my hands tied behind me, and they left me there for an hour. I sat. I had nowhere to be. I thought about the elevator. I thought about the stitched face. I thought about Jana and what I would say to her if I ever saw her again, and decided I would probably not say anything. Boss Tanaka came in alone. He was older than I remembered. The Fifth War had been hard on him. He had lost the use of his left hand and the eye above it, and there was a deep line at the corner of his mouth that had not been there in the old days. He sat down across from me. He had the spool in his good hand. He had, I saw, also watched it. He said, "You came here for a reason." I said, "I came here because there is no one else." He said, "Explain." I explained. I told him what I knew. I told him what I had figured out on the catwalk. I told him that the council was going to vent the habitat, that the xenobites were being grown in numbers for the cleanup, that the spool was the only proof, and that the only people in low tier with the men and the guns and the will to do anything about it were the families. Not just the Tanakas. All of them. The Lin, the Ortega, the old U network on the second deck. All of them. The council had calculated, I said, that the families would fight each other before they fought the council. The council had calculated that the xenobites would handle whatever was left. The council had calculated everything except a tired private investigator walking into a Tanaka safe house with a spool in his hand. He listened. He did not interrupt. When I was done, he sat for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "Why did you come to me first?" I said, "Because you wanted me dead the longest, and if I could convince you, I could convince any of them." He smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who has been waiting for a particular joke for 15 years and has finally heard the end of it. He said, "Untie him." The men untied me. He said, "You understand that after this is over, if there is an after, I am still going to have you killed." I said, "I understand." He said, "Good, get up, we have work to do." What followed took 11 days. I will not pretend I led it. Boss Tanaka led it. He was the one with the network and the standing and the old debts, and he called them in, one family at a time, and one at a time the bosses came to the warehouse on the 14th deck and watched the spool and sat in the same chair I had sat in and listened. The Lin came in on the 3rd day. The Ortega on the 5th. The Yu, who hated the Tanakas more than they hated the council, came in on the 7th, and that was the meeting that nearly went bad, and would have gone bad if the old man Yu had not, at the end of the spool, put his hand flat on the table and said, very quietly, that he had a granddaughter on the 9th deck, and that he would not see her vented into the dark for any reason, including the reason of his pride. After that, the room was different. On the 11th day we moved. I will not pretend it was a plan that would have impressed a general. It was not. It was a street plan made by street people, and it had the shape of the streets in it. The council had no presence in low tier itself, only the xenobites, and the xenobites moved in pairs and patrols on routes that were known, because the families had been watching them for years for reasons of their own. We had a list of the routes. We had a list of the times. We had the spool, and we had the transcript, and we had a transmitter the old U network had been keeping in a basement since the war, the kind the council could not intercept, the kind that broadcast on every channel in the habitat at once and could not be shut down from outside. The plan was simple. We were going to play the spool, not to the bosses, to everyone. 300,000 people in low tier all at once on every screen and every speaker, with the transcript scrolling under it. And while it played, the families were going to take down every Xenobite patrol on the public decks, in the same hour, in the same minute if we could manage it. Because once the spool went out, the council would send the Xenobites in numbers I did not want to think about. And we needed the public decks clear for what came after. What came after was the hard part. The council ran the habitat from a control spire on the surface, but the habitat itself had its own venting controls in a station on the top deck, and that station was where the council would order the venting from when the time came. We were going to take the station, not to use it, to break it. To make the venting impossible from the inside, so that the council would have to come down from the surface to do it themselves, in person, in numbers, where we could see them coming and the rest of the inhabited dark could see them coming too. That was the plan. I was, by the agreement of the bosses, on the team going to the station. I had asked for it. I had asked for it because I had brought them the spool and I felt I owed the spool the rest of the way, and because the team going to the station was the team that was not expected to come back. We moved at the start of the third watch. The spool went out at the same minute. I will tell you what I remember. I remember the silence on the 7th deck when the spool started playing. The market was open. There were people in the market. The screens above the stalls came on all at once, every screen in the deck, every screen in the habitat, and the bruise-colored faces appeared and the transcript scrolled and the market went quiet. Not a stunned quiet, a working quiet, people reading, people understanding. Then very slowly people moving, not panicking, moving, closing stalls, picking up children. Going home, going to find the people they loved. The thing the council had not understood about us was that we are, when we understand a thing, a great deal calmer than they had calculated. The panic comes before the understanding, not after. I remember the first Xenobite I saw go down. It was on the stair between the 7th and the 8th deck. 6 Tanaka men with 3 lengths of mining cable and a cutting torch. They did not shoot it. They did not waste rounds. They got the cable around its neck and they pulled in opposite directions and the cutting torch went in at the joint and the Xenobite kept fighting until its head came off the body. And then the body kept moving for another 4 seconds, and one of the men screamed, and another of the men said, very calmly, "That is what they do not stop," and they did not stop. I remember the lift up to the top deck. The lift was old and slow, and it had been a freight lift in the war, and the team going up in it with me was 8 people, and I had not known any of them before that day, and I knew, looking at them in the red light of the lift, that I would not know most of them for very long. There was a woman from the U network who carried a long knife at her hip and a short shotgun across her back, and who did not speak the whole way up. There was a boy, I will call him a boy, he was perhaps 19, from the Ortega side, who could not stop checking his rifle. There was a man my age from the Lin family who looked at me once in the lift and said, "You are the one who brought the tape," and I said, "I am," and he nodded, and that was the only conversation we had. I remember the station. The station was a half-cylinder of pressure steel at the apex of the habitat, with a viewport that looked out at the stars and the curve of the world below, and inside it there were 2 council technicians and 4 Xenobites. And the 4 Xenobites came at us the moment the lift doors opened. I had been thinking on the way up about the elevator, about the one I had not been able to kill, about the rounds I had spent on it. I had been thinking that we did not need to kill them. We needed to get past them. We needed to reach the venting controls and break them, and that was all. A Xenobite that is fighting a man on the floor is not a Xenobite that is in the way. I told them in the lift what I was going to do. I told them that when the doors opened, I was going to go for the controls, and they were going to keep the Xenobites on the floor, and they were not going to try to kill them. They were going to try to slow them, and that the difference between those 2 things was the difference between us breaking the controls and us dying for nothing. The woman from the U nodded. The boy from the Ortega did not understand. The man from the Lin understood and did not like it, but he understood. The doors opened. I went low and to the right. The first Cenobite turned toward me, and the man from the Lin put his shoulder into its hip, and the Cenobite went sideways into the bulkhead, and the man from the Lin went with it, and I did not look back. The second Cenobite went for the boy, and the boy did the thing he had been doing all the way up the lift, which was to fire his rifle, and the rifle did what rifles do to Cenobites, which is not very much, but the boy did not stop firing and the Cenobite did not turn from him, and that was enough. The third Cenobite went for the woman from the U, and the woman from the U went under its arm with the knife at the joint of its hip, and the Cenobite came down on one knee, and she was on its back with the knife at its throat before it could rise, and I did not stop running, because the fourth Cenobite was between me and the controls. It saw me, the slit and the stitched face fixed on me. It came at me at a walk. I had 3 rounds left in the pistol. I knew 3 rounds was not enough. I knew 9 rounds was not enough. I knew what the Cenobite knew, which was that the math was on its side. I went to the floor in front of it and slid. I am not a young man. I have not been a young man for a long time. But the floor of the station was steel, and there was a film of condensation on it from the cold of the viewport, and I went under the Cenobite's reach on my back with my heels going first, and I came up on the other side of it with my pistol pointed not at the Cenobite, but at the control panel 6 meters away, and I emptied the 3 rounds I had into the panel, into the venting interlock specifically. The part Boss Tanaka had circled for me on a hand-drawn diagram on the 11th day. And the panel sparked, and the interlock blew, and somewhere very deep in the station, something heavy and physical fell into a place it could not be lifted out of without tools the council did not keep on the surface. The Cenobite turned, it came for me, it was very close now. The woman from the U shot it in the back of the head with her short shotgun at a range of 2 meters. The head did not come off, but the slit in the face stopped tracking me. The body kept walking for 3 more steps into the bulkhead, and then it went down. The boy from the Ortega was on the floor. The man from the Lin was on the floor. The 2 council technicians were under a table with their hands over their heads. The woman from the U was reloading. I stood at the broken panel and I looked out the viewport at the stars, and I felt, for the first time since the elevator on the 6th deck, that I was breathing my own air. We held the station for 9 hours. The council sent 4 more Cenobites up. We held them at the lift. The woman from the U was very good with the long knife. I was, by then, very tired, and I did what tired men do, which is to use the things I had learned in the war about small rooms and lift doors, and the geometry of a thing that does not flinch. We lost the boy from the Ortega in the 3rd hour. We lost the man from the Lin in the 6th. We did not lose the station. By the 9th hour, the spool had been playing on a loop on every screen in the habitat for 9 hours, and the people of low tier had done what people of low tier do when they have 9 hours and a reason. They had taken the public decks. They had taken the deck controls. They had taken the transit junctions and the lift shafts and the cargo bays. The council on the surface in the spire had been very quiet for the first 3 hours, and very loud on the broadcast channels for the next 3, and then, in the 7th hour, they had gone quiet again. Boss Tanaka told me later that they had been negotiating with the surface governments. The transcripts from the spool had reached the surface in the 2nd hour. The surface governments had not known. The surface governments had not been told. The surface governments were, by the 7th hour, asking the council certain questions that the council did not have good answers for. The council fell 3 weeks later, not in a battle, in a negotiation. The surface governments removed them from the spire, and the Cenobite vats were sealed, and the venting controls in our station were never repaired because the council that would have repaired them no longer existed in a form that could give orders. The habitat held. 300,000 people held. I came down off the top deck in the 10th hour. I rode the freight lift down with the woman from the U. We did not speak. There was nothing to say. The boy from the Ortega was in a body bag in the back of the lift. The man from the Lynn was in another. The two of us were the ones still upright, and we were upright in the way that men are upright when they have been awake for 36 hours and have done a thing they did not expect to survive. The lift stopped on the 14th deck. Boss Tanaka was waiting in the corridor. He looked at me. He looked at the body bags. He looked at the woman from the U. He nodded once to her, and she nodded back, and she stepped past him with the bags, and the men of the Tanaka family took the bags from her with the care that men take bodies of other men's families. Boss Tanaka looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Do you remember what I told you?" I said, "I remember." He said, "That was 11 days ago. I have been thinking about it. I have been thinking about it for 11 days. I said, "And?" He said, "And you are still going to die in this habitat one day, Icarus, because no man lives forever. But it will not be by my order. Not today, not next year, not ever. The debt is closed." He did not offer me his hand. We did not shake. He turned and walked away down the corridor, and I stood in the lift bay and I watched him go. And after a while I went down to the second deck, and I went into my place, and I bolted the door. And I sat on the floor with my back against the door, and I did not move for a very long time. The woman who had called herself Jana I never saw again. I do not know if she lived or died in the rising. I have my guesses. I have stopped checking. I went back to work after. There was work to do. There always is. A habitat coming out from under a thing like the council has a great deal of business that needs investigating, and a man with my record and my reputation by then did not lack for clients. I kept the office above the noodle bar. I kept the cot in the back. I cleaned my pistol every Sunday. I did not for a long time sleep well. I do not now sleep well. I dream about the elevator. I dream about the stitched face. I dream about the boy from the Ortega checking his rifle in the red light of the lift. And I dream that I tell him in the dream that he does not have to come up with us, that he can stay down on the 7th deck and live. And in the dream he never hears me. He never does. People ask me sometimes how we did it. How a habitat full of gutter people and family men and tired private investigators took down a thing the council had built to be unkillable. I tell them the truth, which is that we did not kill them. We outlasted them. A Cenobite is built without pain, and a thing built without pain does not understand what a man will do when he is in pain and still walking. It does not understand the math of a tired man. It calculates and it patrols and it waits in elevators, and it does not understand that the man it is waiting for has been waiting longer, has been hurting longer, has been carrying a habitat on his back for longer than the Cenobite has been alive in its vat. They were patient. We were stubborn. Patience is a thing a vat can grow. Stubbornness is not. The stars looked the same through the pressure glass as they did before. The market on the 7th deck reopened in the spring. The boy from the Ortega has a name on a wall on the 14th deck, with a great many other names, and I go to the wall sometimes on Sundays after I have cleaned the pistol. I stand in front of his name and I do not say anything, because there is nothing to say that he would not already know. My name is Icarus Van Calder. I am 48 years old. I live in a habitat the council tried to vent into the dark, and I am still here, and so are 300,000 other tired and stubborn people, and the lights are on, and the air is good, and the stars are where they have always been. That is the story. That is all of it. The rest is the work that comes after, which is the work that is always there, and which a man does because a man does it, and not for any reason that would satisfy a thing without breath.